Sometimes, as they say, these things happen in mixed martial arts. My name is Sean Sheehan. I'm joined today by the Cage Warriors commentator Brad Wharton to preview Cage Warriors 134. And not to break the fourth wall or anything here, but this is the second time we're sitting down to break down Cage Warriors 134. There has been a lot of changes to the card. The main event has been changed. There's a new title fight on the line. There's a massive new lightweight fight as well, which I'm really excited about. There's a fight we announced the last time we we did this preview that's actually not happening now. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. Brad, how are you? What kind of as the commentator for the card this weekend, what kind of a mad day have you had so far with the rest of the Cage Warriors scene, kind of just breaking down what's actually happening today, because it's insanity so far this week?
I'll be honest, my blood pressure probably has not been as high as Ian Dean's. You know, for me, it's just a case of I've got to move some notes around in the old notebook. So, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world for me. But look, man, you've got to give the Cage Warriors team credit. You know, many moons ago, they moved an event from Sweden to Jordan on 3 weeks' notice. They've had an event in Jordan when there was a snowstorm and fighters couldn't get in, and we literally... In 10 years, it's the only time a Cage Warriors show has ever started late, because we literally had to send two lads out with shovels to dig the snow off the top of the broadcast truck. But the show happened. You know, the 2 years ago when COVID first started, the event was moved from London to Manchester on 5 days' notice, and it happened. And all through the pandemic, every 3 months, 3 shows back to back, Cage Warriors got it done. So, you know, it's been a bit of a crazy couple of days for the team there, but Cage Warriors have done what they always do, and we're going to have a show on Friday night.
Yeah, indeed, 100%. You know, I think some people call Ian Dean like the greatest unknown person in MMA, but I don't think he's very unknown anymore. I think everyone knows who Ian Dean is. We've certainly talked about him a lot over the last few years, and to me, he has saved this card again. And Charles and the fighters obviously have saved it, and Graham Boylan and everyone involved with Cage Warriors. What we have here is still a great card. So let's break down quickly what we were supposed to have and what we have now. So the main event was supposed to be Jordan Vucenic versus Paul Hughes. That fight is no longer happening. Cage Warriors literally announced moments before we record this that Paul Hughes is out with a neck injury, and we will see what happens there. Jordan Vucenic is now fighting against James Hendin. James Hendin was originally due to fight, oh god, I'm getting mixed up here. Who's it? James Hendin was fighting Steve Amiable. Then James Hendin was supposed to fight Tobias Harila. So Tobias Harila was supposed to fight Jeremy Peatley. Then he was supposed to fight James Hendin, and now he's fighting McAleenan at lightweight in an absolute banger of a fight. McAleenan was supposed to fight Dan Collins. Then he was supposed to fight Paul McBain. That fight has fallen now. Paul McBain says now he's going to be fighting in April. That fight wasn't even announced, I don't think, but it got cancelled before it was even announced. And now he's fighting against Tobias Harila. So if you can get your head around all of that, I think I did a good job actually there of explaining that. To be fair, if you can get your head all around all of that, you're doing well.
We need one of those whiteboards on the background with some red string and everyone's names. So I'll work that out for next time.
Do you know that meme with your man from is it Always Sunny in Philadelphia? I've never seen the show,
exactly.
but it's just the madness going around. So thoughts, Brad, first of all. We'll get into the individual fights here in a second, but what are your thoughts on all of this madness? I feel like, not to go mad, but I feel like that Jackie versus Harila fight is nearly worth some of it, because that is such a banger of a fight. There's some great ones here still, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, first of all, we want to wish Paul Hughes well. A neck injury is never good for anyone, especially a young man like Paul who's got the best years of his career ahead of him. So I hope whatever the issue is, it can be resolved and he can get back in there, as soon as it's safe and healthy for him to do so. And, it sucks for Jordan as well, because these guys, have a bit of unfinished business. And, you never know if the winner's going to get signed by the UFC still. And, if Jordan wins and goes off to the UFC, we may not get to see these guys fight, at least in the immediate future. So, it's a shame on that front. But like you say, Ian Dean's worked his magic, and we've got some really interesting fights now. I mean, what an opportunity for James Hendin, who, has gone through that issue now of, am I going to even get rematched for this card? Have I been training for 2 months for nothing? Are they going to be able to find me someone on short notice? Ends up taking the fight against a very different guy in Tobias Harila. And all of a sudden, a couple of days later, the phone goes and it's, look, do you want a shot at the Cage Warriors title now? So what an opportunity for this guy. I think we talked about it on the initial preview that we did. You talked about Paul Hughes maybe utilizing the takedowns and the ground game a bit more against Vucenic. Well, look, that's James Hendin's game to a T. He is a takedown monster. His wrestling, his positional control is phenomenal. This could be a really interesting clash of styles between these two guys. Vucenic, you've got to believe he's going to want to stay on his toes, stay away from Hendin, peppering his man. Hendin's going to be crashing forward like we knew he would against Harila, but these takedowns could be crucial now. The big question for me is James Hendin ready for a 5-round fight? That could be what separates the two guys in this one.
That is massive. We've seen it recently, even, in shorter fights. We saw last week with Terence McKinney taking that fight in the UFC. He goes out there and he tries to get the finish early and he tires very early as well because maybe he isn't prepared for the 3 rounds. And now, okay, it's a little bit different. As you say, Hendin is preparing for a 3-round fight and has been for this card, but 5 rounds is a very, very big difference here. I think a massive difference as well for Vucenic. As you mentioned, he's preparing for Paul Hughes. And if you go back and you watch that first fight, we discussed it, previously, obviously, so that you've never seen it, so I'll have to mention it again, that in that 3rd round of that fight against Paul Hughes, Vucenic, was able to stop his takedowns very, very well. And, I commented, and I think a lot of people commented after the fight, why didn't Paul Hughes take him to the ground again? Because he had an advantage here. But it was more to do with Vucenic stopping those takedowns than Hughes not going for him, because, as Dan Strauss said on the commentary at the time as well, in the 3rd round, Vucenic had stopped 3 of those takedowns, and when that happens, fighters kind of give up on it, and rightly so, you're expending energy. So I think Vucenic, in some ways, was preparing for a guy who he knows he can stop his takedowns. Like when Hughes did get it to the ground, it wasn't really a takedown. It was more of a scramble, more of up against the fence, whatever it was, and it just kind of ended up there. This is a big difference, though. This is a guy who, I'm not saying he will be able to go in there and just take Vucenic down or anything like that, but I would say he's probably a better wrestler than Paul Hughes in a different sort of way. If you're, put him into a wrestling match, I think Hughes is faster and, a better all-round fighter they fought before. So there's not wrong with me saying that. And obviously Hughes won that fight. But it's a very, very different matchup, as you say there, for Vucenic. How big do you think that is of a change for Vucenic? Hughes, predominantly known these days as a striker, as we saw, look, he can fight all around. He's absolutely a very, very well-rounded fighter. As is Hendin. But Hendin, wrestler, it's a very different matchup. It's almost hard to get a bigger change up in matches in this short of a notice, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we've got to give credit to Jordan Vucenic here as well, because it would have been very easy for him to say, you know what, 4 days out, nah, no thank you, I'm not going to bother. But look, he's gambling on himself here because the UFC are in town. There's going to be a big spotlight on this event. And the fact of the matter is, he is the defending champion. A big win, a big title defense could very well be the victory that gets him signed to the UFC. So, he's putting a lot of pressure on himself to do well here. I mean, it would be, you would say an upset. I think that's fair. With all due respect to James Hendin, I think it would be considered an upset if you were to come in and beat Jordan Vucenic. And that's going to be on Vucenic's mind. He's got everything to lose here. And as you say, stylistically, just a completely different kind of opponent. So it'll be very interesting to see what Danny Batten and the team at BST can put together in the next 4 days that's going to deal with James Hendin. I mean, look, it's too late in the day now to start bringing wrestlers in to chuck Vucenic around the training room, right? He's going to be wrapping himself in cotton wool. In fact, I think Ian Dean's probably going to be mailing out the cotton wool to everybody on this card now. But look, that's the fact of the matter, right? They can't bring a stud wrestler in now to throw Jordan Vucenic around for the next 2 weeks. He's got 4 days, and he's going to be doing his weight cut. So very, very interested to see how this one plays out. As I say, I think Hendin will be the underdog, but I'm sure he's perfectly happy being in that position. All the pressure's on the opponent, and if he can cause an upset here, that's really going to set tongues wagging. Massive.
It'll be absolutely massive. I think Vucenic is very, very, very mentally strong, Don. I definitely think that'll help him here. And if he can keep the fight in the feet, he'll be a massive favourite, I think. But it's a very intriguing fight. You know, it is one that kind of you know, it kind of previews itself, and for Hendin as well, if he wins, you've that immediate rematch either against Vucenic or the rematch against Paul Hughes. And you know, France is open up now. Morgan Charrier is still around here as well. There's some big fights. This is a massive opportunity for Hendin. And as you say, look, there's rumours Dana White's going to be cage side. The UFC is on the next night. If Hendin makes nice, if Vucenic makes nice, if someone wins this and you know it's a standout, they could very well be signed to the UFC next. And unfortunately for Paul Hughes, you know, obviously I'm Irish and talk a lot about the Irish fighters. Sometimes we concentrate because Paul Hughes is maybe the bigger name as well. But Vucenic is just as good a fighter as Paul Hughes and deserves his spot in the UFC. I've said it previously on lots of different places that I think both guys will end up in the UFC, and this is James Hendin's opportunity now to kind of to change that party. So we'll see how this goes. But I'm looking forward to that main event in a big way. Now I was really looking forward to Hughes versus Vucenic, but unfortunately that's not happening. Because of that, though, we have McAleenan versus Tobias Harila. And it's one of those fights, you know, I think you said a similar sort of thing before. You've never even thought of that fight, but now I hear about it and immediately my first reaction is, what a fight. Because Harila, if people don't know him, he's a guy who from the backstage to when the fight starts to after the fight, he's gone straight forward. He's a madman. He's absolutely insane. The pace he puts on in his last fight against William Gomez, that kind of went badly for him because Gomez was able to fight on the outside, use his length, use his speed. McAleenan is a big, long fighter. Harila's gone up in a weight class as well. Look, Decky's very good on the ground as well, but you know, Decky always kind of says, like, people feel my striking and they take me down, and that's why people think maybe I'm a ground fighter, because everyone's trying to take me down. Harila won't, he might try to take him down, but he won't immediately try to take him down. Harila will go forward, and if Decky hits him 10 times, he'll keep going forward. This, to me, I think if Decky can deal with that pace, and if he can deal with the pressure of Harila, and, you know, use his sideways foot movement and use his jab and use his head movement and speed, we could have an absolute classic of a fight here. I love this matchup. Honestly, it's one of those, you hear it and you're like, oh, what a fight. What do you think it is? What was your first reaction when you heard about this fight?
Yeah, absolutely. We sort of said this last week when we talked about the Paul McBain versus Decky fight. You were like, well, you never would have thought that in a million years. Two guys in different weight divisions. But when you think about it, it actually would have been a really good fight. So, you know, when I heard that Paul was moved, my first assumption was that there was going to be some crazy switching around of fights, and that the McAleenan-McBain fight itself would be moved to Manchester. But then finding out that McBain's being put on Manchester, Decky's staying on the card, and he's taken on Harila, it's just like, oh wow, man, Ian Dean's done it again. Look, let me tell you something about Harila. First of all, I don't remember which show it was, but it was one of the trilogy events that because he was supposed to fight a few times and didn't get to on the trilogies. They were I don't know if there was issues with injuries or COVID or whatever it was, and that there was an event or two that he turned up to and didn't end up fighting. He was sat there at featherweight on weighing day saying, I will fight up to welterweight, and I don't care who it is, I'll fight anyone. Get me a fight up to 170 pounds, find me a man to sign the dotted line, and I'll take it. So that's the mentality here. That's the attitude. This is a guy who, you know, he's been turned down by guys on the Cage Warriors roster. I talked to his coach, and he said, look, you know, there's some of these quote-unquote big names on the Cage Warriors roster, and they've been given Tobias his name, and they're out there on the internet saying they'll fight anyone, and all of a sudden they've gone very, very quiet. This is a guy who I would imagine is not best pleased with all the messing around that he's had with not getting fights and opponents not wanting to fight him. He could be a very, very dangerous prospect going into this fight with Decky. Now, from Decky's part, he's got a very mature head on young shoulders. You know, this is a guy who can go out there and not necessarily get caught up in his opponent's game plan. He's got that long traditional martial arts background, and I think that's going to be key here. Just keeping his head, because we know Harila's going to come in trying to take it off in the first few minutes. He's going to be giving up a little bit of size, a little bit of weight. I know Tobias has competed at lightweight before, so I don't think it's going to be a massive issue. But look, I think the first round's going to be the decider here. Whoever sets the pace, they're going to come. They're going to be going into the last stage of the fight in a much stronger position.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's. I think Harila will set the pace. Honestly, I don't think you can fight against Tobias Harila and not fight at his pace. Honestly, unless you fight at a faster pace, which William Gomez kind of did. So Decky's going to have to live with that. But Decky is not the type of guy to turn down fights either. You know, as we've seen this week, he took fucking 3 different names in the space of 72 hours, or there or thereabouts. So these two guys, like, I don't think Decky gets enough credit, honestly, from the fans and people, you know, covering the sport. This guy's a very good fighter. He takes on all names, takes on all comers throughout the division, and I would have loved to have seen this for the title even. I like, my first thought was they were going to make Hardwick versus Decky for the title when this kind of fell out, but obviously Hardwick is fighting against Kopera even, which we'll talk about in a second as well. But this fight is just phenomenal. It really is phenomenal, and we'll see a lot of things, I think, differently from both guys in this. We'll see if Decky can deal with that pressure, but also if the fight goes to the ground. You know, I think Harila, it'll be interesting to see how he deals with Decky's jiu-jitsu and his ability off his back with those elbows and those triangles and all of that. That's not easy. You know, that's really not easy when you're rising through the levels. And some people, you know, we talk about the test, the wrestler test, or the black belt test, or whatever it might be. There's a test for him if he does take Decky down, and Decky's, his bottom game is very, very dangerous. Look, and his game from the top is dangerous as well. And obviously up the weight class, as you said, he'll fight at any weight class, but it does make a difference when you're in there and you're probably just about starting your weight cut to get down to 145, and you know, he probably still has a little bit of weight to cut to get down to 155. We know the reality of weight cuts these days, but yeah, it's an interesting one. It's such a great fight, and I absolutely can't wait for that. But I know time is a little bit against us today, so we'll run through the rest of the card very quickly. We took this video on short notice as well. Everything in Cage Warriors is on short notice this week.
We're the real heroes.
Give us a bonus. Come on, Graham Boylan, give us a bonus. George Hardwick versus Lukasz Kopera. I mentioned it earlier on. Look, Hardwick, I think anyone who's seen Hardwick knows what type of fighter he is. He's a really great inside fighter for me. Like, some people, you might watch him and you think, oh, he's good and he's fancy from the outside. But I think those little shots and little is probably a bad word for him because they're very, very powerful, but those shots inside, quick shots that you'd hardly even see, he's so accurate with them, so powerful with them. I think that's where he's really good, and he's very good as well when he kind of gets stuck in the inside. You know, when you throw those shots, sometimes you get, you know, takedown attempts, or you get the fight up against the fence, and he's good against the fence. He's good when he kind of pulls a leg out from under someone and gets on top of him. I think Kopera, like, watching some of his fights, he's tough. You know, he can take a lot of damage. He comes forward, he'll throw his hands. I think George Hardwick is a little bit of a different class now. You know, we'll see. Look, we'll see on Friday night if that's true or not. But it's an intriguing matchup, and I think one for Hardwick as well. It's a test, isn't it? It's a test against a tough guy who has a lot of experience on, you know, big shows against tough guys, and it's kind of, I think it's a good move for Hardwick. Now, obviously, you know, he was supposed to have a title fight. He was supposed to have 2 or 3 title fights, and they all fell out. And it's you know, another one that's saved by Aidan, obviously, at a catch weight, 161 pounds as well. But it's a good test, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you feel for George because he was supposed to fight Mehdi for the title, and then he's fighting a completely different style of fighter in Daniello, which was supposed to be the co-main event, I believe, originally for this card. And of course, then it changes again. And you know, Hardwick was told that, look, you're in that title shot position now. You can wait if you want. But he was like, look, you know, I prepared at the end of last year. I prepared at the start of this year. I need to fight. You know, he's in his prime as a young man and a fighter, and he wanted to go out there and put the work in. Look, Ian Dean's not going finding the scraps around Europe. He's bringing in tough guys. You know, you're not going to get a fight just to tide you over if you're in that sort of title contention level at Cage Warriors. And Kopera has been fighting killers in ACA. You know, all those guys are, you know, very intense, very well put together, shall we say. That's probably the most politically correct way of saying it. But look, you know, when you go in there against these guys, and you know, he's not being finished. He's had a few mixed results lately, but I believe he's only been stopped once. He's had a doctor stoppage as well, but only stopped once. You know, by an opponent. This is a tough guy. And this is a guy who's probably going to be able to take some of Hardwick's best shots. So the shot selection could be important here. We saw that against Dean Truman, where he was able to dip down to the body and put Truman down with the body shot. If he can find a way to keep this guy off him, keep it at that nice little inside range that he likes to keep it at without getting gripped up. That's where I think his best work's going to be done in this fight. Look for that good shot selection and look for him to try and put this guy away. Whether he'll be able to do it or not, I'm not sure, but it'll be an impressive feat if he's the second guy to finish Kopera.
Indeed, the King of Middlesbrough always gets it done. I'm looking forward to seeing that one. There are 4 other fights on the card as well. 2 kind of up-and-comers in terms of the fights. Nik Bagley versus Ben Ellis, 2 very good wrestlers, 2 very good fighters. Seem like I've watched Nik Bagley fight about 100 times in the last couple of weeks. He fought as Scott Bellator was on that Bellator card recently. That should be a very fun. I think Bagley's 2-0. Ellis is 3-1 in his career now. Lanier Cavan and Ryan Morgan as well, very young in their careers. You know, these are the guys you see maybe 2 or 3 times on Cage Warriors, and then you realise this is an next Paul Hughes, this is the next Vucenic, what it might be, and it'll be interesting to see who gets through on those fights. The other 2 then, Kingsley Crawford. Whenever Kingsley Crawford fights, I'm tuning in. A really, really fun fighter. He's fighting Aidan James. Really looking forward to that. And Will Currie against Patrick Vallee, who made his debut, I think, back in 2003. He's been around since God was a boy. You know, Will Currie is still very young in his career. Lost twice in a row, obviously, to Christian Leroy Duncan, the first of which was a very odd one, you know, as we all know what happened, and the rematch had to come back then. Christian Leroy Duncan's fighting for the title coming up here very soon. So I'm sure Will Currie will want to win this fight and put himself right back in the mix to fight against Christian Leroy Duncan again. So that's a big fight. I don't know if it's true, but Cage Warriors on the website here have that in the co-main event, so I'd be interested if that is the co-main event. I think that and Hardwick are the 2 kind of second best fights now, although Decky versus Harila are probably up there as well now at this stage. But those 4 fights, Brad, a quick breakdown maybe before you go. A big fight for Currie, isn't it? A big fight for Kingsley Crawford and Aidan James as well, and the kind of the up-and-comers on their way up.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for Will Currie, you know, I've talked about this on commentary before, and I've talked about it with you, Sean. You know, he's got those defeats now. You know, unfortunately, you know, 2 in a row to Christian Leroy Duncan. Did get back on track last time out. But look, you know, this guy's in a position where he may have lost to the future champion potentially twice, but he still might be the second best guy in the division. He's very, very talented. He's very raw, very young, and he's got a lot of time to develop, and he's in a good position training under someone like Jimmy Manoa, who's been to the very, very top of the sport, seen it all, and he's very, very high on this kid. And you can see why. He's physically incredibly well put together, and this middleweight division, you know, it's pretty open. Matt Bonner dropping to welterweight now, so he's kind of out of the equation. Not really sure what's going on with Matthias Frederick, but that might be a potential good fight for Will Currie in the future. And obviously, you know, it depends what happens with Duncan and Jati Milan in April as to where this division is going to be. So, you know, he's in a very good position here that if he can get a win over a guy like Patrick Vallee, who's just been around the game for ages, fought nothing but killers, been in some really entertaining fights. Look, this is the level of guy that he needs to beat to say to Cage Warriors, look, I'm still up there, stick me right back in at the top. And if he can get a win or, you know, even a stoppage against Patrick, who's a well-travelled guy, I mean, that's going to look really, really good on his record at this early stage in his career.
Yeah,
Aidan James, Kingsley Crawford, what a fight, man. I mean, you know, this is the kind of fight that makes me want to, you know, take the headset off, sit back, have a beer, and just watch it. You know, I'll leave it to Dan Strauss and Dan Hardy. Like, these 2 guys, I'm a fan of both of them. You know, we saw Aidan James against Felipe Rouche in his Cage Warriors debut. Look very, very impressive. Kingsley Crawford's been fighting here for a long, long time, and he seems to have really put it together in these last few fights. Again, you know, this is a fight which is going to have a lot of potential to alter the rankings in that division. I'm very much looking forward to it. And as you said, you know, the 2 prospects coming out of GB Top Team, looking forward to how they perform against good opposition as well.
Indeed, Brad, I really appreciate your time here. I know it's all been a bit of a rush today. That's all bad. I won't keep you any longer. Thank you very much for joining me. Check out Cage Warriors this Friday night. It's on UFC Fight Pass all around the world. Follow at Cage Warriors over on Twitter. You can find out everywhere it is. Follow Brad on Twitter at MMA Brad 48. Did I get it right this time? I think I got it right this time. Very good. Thank you to everyone for watching. My name is Sean Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and we'll see you all next time.